I've given quite a few mentions recently to automation, and a lot of what I've been up to has at least been a potential benefit to automation. So I did start looking into it again, and I got Dispatcher going, and I started programming some trains, and really quickly came to the conclusion that Dispatcher isn't for me. Dispatcher was written for a set of requirements that aren't the same as my requirements. So I need to start thinking about whether I just call a stop to automation or whether I look for alternatives. And there are alternatives within JMRI itself. Things like warrants, or blocks, or paths, portals, all seem to lend themselves to a different kind of automation, and one that's not driven by Dispatcher. I did look into it, but the amount of extra configuration and time it would need to get all that set up wasn't really very appealing to me, because I've kind of already configured my layout. I've configured all those blocks and sensors and this panel and everything else. So if I'm going to do any automation based in JMRI, it's got to support the configuration work that I've already done. And I should perhaps explain myself before I go any further. The principal reason why I think Dispatcher is not suitable for me is this whole thing about Dispatcher expecting to have full control of the whole layout when it's running, when it's dispatching train. What that means is, while Dispatcher is controlling trains, dispatching trains, running trains, it is fully in charge of the whole layout of every train. By Dispatcher's rules, I'm not allowed to just kick up a throttle of my own and drive a manual train around. It's not expecting that. It doesn't want me to do that, and also it's not compatible with that, and it would lead to, despite all the early warning systems and all those kind of things, it's still very likely to lead to derailments and short circuits. It's a very viable option, and one that I really considered, especially after I made a video a month or two ago, and a lot of people suggested alternatives to JMRI, is to find an alternative to JMRI. And I think iTrain was one that I at least Googled and had a look at the website for, but the thing that made me hesitate was it doesn't appear to, and this is only as a result of a quick Google, it doesn't appear to support MQTT. The problem I've got with that is every single accessory that feeds back into, at the minute, JMRI into MQTT uses MQTT, and that means all of the Arduinos that control the devices, as one kind of hidden under that nest of wires there, all the devices that control these accessories all use MQTT to communicate the status of those accessories back to whatever software is driving the trains and the layout. But if the software that's driving the trains and the layout doesn't support MQTT, then that's a heck of a lot of work for me, even before I start thinking about rebuilding diagrams of the layout and recreating sensors in whatever software I'm using. So I thought, well, it looks like I'm going to be wringing every last bit of functionality I can out of JMRI before, I think, giving up on automation. If I can't get JMRI to do what I want to do with automation, then at least in the short and medium term, at least, I'm just going to give up on automation. JMRI is very extensible. It's open source. If I knew Java, I could dive in and start writing my own version of Dispatcher, I guess. It supports a lot of scripting in Python, but neither of those languages I'm particularly familiar with or enjoy working with. And then the last thing I sort of thought of was, well, have I already done quite a lot of development work that I could reuse if I was to write something that would run automated trains? First of all, I've written this software which kind of tracks ahead of running trains, looks for danger. It also actually supports allocation, so that the blocks ahead that it checks, that it knows the train is moving into, if they're clear, it has an option, I don't use it at the minute, to allocate those blocks to that train, and that is quite similar to a lot of the work I would need to do with automation. The other work I've done, which kind of might well help with the direction I'm going in, is all the work I've done on these knob boxes that communicate with WeThrottle. And WeThrottle provides an interface from which, through code, I can control trains. So I thought, if I can combine those two together, if I'm running a piece of software in Windows that is tracking the state of a layout, tracking the journey of trains, tracking the state and occupancy of blocks, the state of turnouts and what state they're in, and I've got some code that will drive trains, can I combine those together? Something else that the WeThrottle interface offers up and can be demonstrated by using the Engine Driver app, for example, is the ability to get the current state of turnouts. It also sends the state of a turnout if that turnout is changed to any client, and it also accepts requests to set turnouts. So that could be really useful if I'm going to write some automation that uses WeThrottle as its interface for control. So kidding a sweet shop time, then if I was going to write some automation software, what would I want it to do that I don't believe Dispatcher currently does? Well, first of all, these darn shuttles. I would like to be able to randomly run every 5 minutes a shuttle from a bay platform to a branch line platform, and I would like that to happen while I'm driving manual trains. And I've just modified slightly the code for that bit of monitoring software that I wrote, just to demonstrate that it has the functionality to allocate ahead for the trains that it's currently tracking. So these are all manual trains, they're being driven by the knob box down there. But what it's doing is, as a train goes into a new block, it's checking 2 blocks ahead for danger, and now what it's also doing is, if there's no danger there, it's allocating, reserving those 2 blocks to that train, which means nothing else, including an automated train, and this is where Dispatcher fell down, should be able to access in any way that block, change any points in any way in that block, because it's reserved for the train that's about to hit it. And that would resolve all of the derailment and short circuit concerns I've got about running automated trains at the same time as manual trains. Also, well, I use RFID, so because of that, and because JMRI is good at tracking JMRID, it knows that in this yard, in that third line up, there's a super sprinter sat at the front. What I'd like to be able to do is say to the automation software, start the train that's in that block. I don't want to have to tell it what train's in that block because it already knows. So what I'd really like to be able to do, and this is kind of the second requirement of some automation software, is just say, the train that's in that block, drive it to the station, and for the software to do the rest, work out I have to tell it which station platform I want, but okay, I know the super sprinter's in that block, I'm going to calculate a route from that block to the station platform, and I'm then going to drive it. As well as station platforms, of course, this yard is going to be a very common destination for any automated trains. The reverse of the one I just mentioned, there might be a train in a platform over there, and I might want to say, drive the train in that platform into the yard. And now what I'd really like to be able to do is not have to specify where in the yard I want it to drive to. I just want it to put it in the yard. So also imagine I had a button above each of these yard lines, and the button was effectively an instruction to tidy the yard line up. So it says, okay, so this is the front of the anti-clockwise yard line here, and say this one, there's a class 91 right at the back of the line, but there's space at the front. So if I press the button for that yard line, what it says is, okay, there's space at the front, I can see there's a class 91 at the back, because again it knows what's in each block, and it drives the 91 up to the front, stops it, and then makes space at the back, so that anything that is coming down from the station or whatever it is coming into the yard has space to pull up to the back of a line.
So I do think I'm kind of clear in my head now about what my approach to this is going to be, and I think it's only really viable in my head now because there's so much of it potentially that I've done already. For example, the WeThrottle stuff I'd already written for the Arduino code in C++, so it didn't really take all that much to do a quick copy paste and write it for C Sharp. I've also got this code that reads the XML config file that has got all of my layout settings saved in it in JMRI. It reads it, it pulls information from it, it constructs objects in C Sharp that I can use. I should probably mention as well that C Sharp and Visual Studio, they're my kind of more comfortable development environments. So with me having particular personality traits like impatience and laziness, I want this to be in use as quickly as possible with as little effort as possible. So really learning to use Java, I'd love to learn to use Java. I'd love to contribute to the JMRI project in that way, but I'm not there yet, and I just want this thing up and running. So that's the reason why it's being written in C Sharp, and instead of directly communicating with JMRI, it's using all of the web interfaces to achieve this. One of which being WeThrottle. There's another one over here. This is the code that I'd already written again for previous projects that reads the JSON server, the JSON web server that JMRI offers up. So this is where I get all information on live blocks, which blocks have just gone live, which trains in which block. All that information comes from reading the web JSON server that JMRI offers up. Also using the roster, so reading all the roster files to get settings for trains. That's going to help with, I'm going to look to have properties in the roster for the length of trains and all kinds of useful information like that. So again, so I don't have to keep entering it every time I create a new, want a new journey to happen. I just want the app to be able to go pull information from as many sources as possible so that I'm not stood at a computer screen telling it what to do. You know, the information's there. It knows what block's occupied, it knows what trains in that block. From the roster it can get various bits of information about that. From the web server it can, from the config file it can. So the general approach really is to use all those available sources to make it as streamlined and low maintenance from a user point of view as possible.
I've got a first version of this app up here running now. Now, usually it would be on the second screen, just so I can still see the layout diagram, the panel. But I'm desktop recording this just to try and demonstrate it more. So to have them both on the same screen, I'm just going to drag this over here and try to leave kind of the important bits I need to demonstrate visible on the panel below. So the idea of this is it wants to be as simple as possible. I like it to be as simple as possible to get an auto train running, and it can use RFID and a few other little tricks to do that. So it's already interfacing with WeThrottle. So if I click on start, it'll start pulling all this information through. That's the roster that WeThrottle sends us at the start. This is I've got these marked as kind of popular destination blocks. I'm not really using this at the minute actually, so I will leave that for now. And the start blocks it's got listed here are the blocks it's identified on the layout that are occupied, and that also it can read an RFID value from, so it knows not just that the block's occupied, but what train is in there as well. I've started off just using transits. I'd really like to just be able to say go from this block to that block, but I'm not quite there yet. I haven't written the code to work out the route. So for the time being, just while I'm learning, I've got transits. Now the only transits it's put in this list are the ones that have an active train that can identify in the start block. So as soon as I've picked that train, it said, okay, I'm going to go from this block, I'm going to end in this block, and I'm going to use this train. And that's all it needs. So what I also have down here, and I will keep monitoring, if I click on start transit, it's immediately going to start plotting ahead the route. And what the microphone might have picked up there is it's also started setting points. So it knows what block the train is currently in, and as it moves around the layout, it'll still know what block it's in. So what it's doing effectively is 2 blocks, 2 sections actually ahead of that train. It's checking to see if that those 2 sections are available unoccupied, and if they are, it's reserving them for the train. And when they go yellow and get the ID tag in them, that means they're reserved for this train. And what effectively that means is, as soon as it's reserved, it sets the points in the favour of that train in order to get to its destination. And what that's saying to the layout and to JMRI and to any other app and to me as well as a user of manual trains is these blocks are now set in favour of this train. They're reserved for this train. They're not available to any other trains until this one has passed through. And this is the point, obviously, when it would start driving this train, but I haven't added that code yet. So I'm also going to just select this transit because it adds more information. Something that's frustrated me in the past is automation software can make decisions. It can stop trains, speed them up, slow them down, not start them, whatever, but it never really gave me a reason why it was doing any of that. So right from the start, I'm putting reasons on the screen for why it's doing what it's doing. So it signals proceed, and didn't really need any explanation for that, but it's given me a speed of caution, and it's given me the reason that there's a turnout thrown in the next block. And I kind of thought a good way to manage speed and reduce the risk of derailments is because the layout or the app knows that the train's going over a turnout. It knows it's in a block that's got a thrown turnout in it. So when it's approaching a block that's got a thrown turnout in it, slow the train down. While it's going through the block with the thrown turnout in it, slow the train down. And only when it gets confirmation that the train has left the block with the thrown turnout in it does it speed the train back up again. But it gives me all the reasons for that in there. So this would be the point where it would start driving the train. It's not going to, because there's no code for that. So the train is way down there. It's that class 158 that's just at the end of that near side line. But I've got a throttle, so I'm going to start moving the train, and off it goes. So coming back to the app, it's starting to plot the route for this train around the layout, and it's setting, you'll hear clicks, the relays, the relay clicks are the relays setting the polarity on frogs for points that get changed. And as it goes around and reserve, this is a good example down just under the window, that red dot there. As soon as this block gets occupied, it will reserved, it will set the points in its favour, and there it was. It was just below where I'm stood actually. But all the time it's giving me these updates on where the train is. It's about to come through, actually physically through here. There we are. And it's now going to make its way around. It's going to do one lap of this anti-clockwise loop, and then it's going to head up the incline, and you can see its path is getting there. It's going to need these 2 crossovers set in its favour when it gets there in order to get onto the incline line. So as soon as the train enters the next block, which is now, they've just been set, and these have been reserved. Now the thing to note here as well is the incline. Now it doesn't always set these lines to yellow, but that is just decoration. As long as they've got the train ID in them, then they are reserved. It's a bit of a, I don't know, an MQTT thing, which I'll have to look at. But it's reserved the entire incline in its favour now in one go as well. So which is more than 2 sections or 2 blocks ahead. So it's put them all in a section. The reason why it's done that is once it commits, once it goes over that crossover that it's going over now, it's on a single line which is bi-directional. So what we don't want is another train coming this way and heading down on the incline at the same time, because they'll just meet in the middle somewhere where it's passing over there, and they won't be able to get past each other. So as soon as it commits to that single bi-directional line, it reserves the whole thing. This is reserved, it just hasn't gone yellow. And it reserves it up to here, which is kind of considered a safe point. Now, as it moves up here, it's having a little think about it, but it's carried on. We're now getting, and I'll try not to concentrate on the screen actually, because I think I'm screen recording that anyway. So it's going to start reserving, or at least setting points, and this crossover, it wants to get onto the anti-clockwise line, So this crossover has now been set in its favour, which will set it off on the anti-clockwise line, sorry. Now next time round it's going to come into this station bay, but this time round it's going to go and do a lap. So everything down that end of the layout will already be set for it, because it's just pretty much a loop with not many sets of points on it. But as it starts getting back towards this end, what we'll see is this set of points gets set in the train's favour, because it had to be set in its favour to come across and onto this line, but it's now going to come across from this way. So as it makes its way around, it's kind of, I think when it gets about a third of the way down here, it will activate the block that's 2 sections back. So again, if we come back, there we go, I've got a feeling there it's just gone. And also it's now set its entry to the bay platform, and I need to get back to the knob box quickly because I'm driving this train, not the computer. But up here it's going to start, although it signals proceed at the minute, it's going to start. There we go, it's realised it's getting close to the end of the journey, which is actually, if I've got time to do it, down there we go, just. But it's now entered the bay platform. I can see it's exited the block before, which would be the trigger to ramp down, and I haven't quite worked out how I'm going to do that yet. But back over there, you can see the 158 is now in that bay platform. So my next job is to work out how to actually control the speed.